7 years before a television crew ever drove up the gravel at Roloff Farms, Matt Roloff walked into a bookstore in Oregon and found his own name on a shelf. Biography section. Inspirational, depending on the store. A hardcover with a colored dust jacket, 182 pages, priced somewhere near $18. The title read, Against Tall Odds. Under it, a subtitle, Being a David in a Goliath World. That was July of 1999. Almost nobody who watches Little People, Big World knows the book exists. They know Matt, the farm owner. Matt, the pumpkin season showman. Matt, the Instagram account with something close to 800,000 followers and a habit of posting construction updates at odd hours. What gets lost is that a whole career came before all of that, and the book was its centerpiece. Consider what Matt already had on his resume by the time the book shipped. He designed and sold complex computer systems to businesses, a real technical sales job with real commissions. He had served as national president of Little People of America. He stood on stages for money, giving talks to Tyson Foods, to Walmart, to Indiana University, to the South Dakota Governor's Conference. Corporate America was already paying to hear him speak. Multnomah Books, one of the more successful Christian publishers in the country at the time, had signed him to a real book deal and assigned him a professional co-writer. None of that came from television. All of it came first. So the question worth asking is what Matt actually put in those pages and why he chose to frame his life the way he did. Take the title apart. David and Goliath is one of the oldest stories in the Old Testament and one of the most overused metaphors in English. A shepherd boy drops a giant with a sling and one stone. Matt applied it to himself without any hedging. He was small. The world was large. His life had been a run of unlikely wins. The metaphor was not clever, and he was not trying to be clever. He was telling a Christian audience, in language they already knew by heart, exactly who he thought he was. That audience choice mattered. Multnomah published devotionals, testimonies, inspirational biography. Their readers were churchgoers looking for books that confirmed what they already believed about perseverance and providence. Matt fit the shelf. Christian, articulate, successful in business, 4 kids, a physical difference that made his ordinary accomplishments look extraordinary. The publisher recognized a match and signed him. It helps to remember what 1999 looked like in publishing. Christian houses were in the middle of a boom. Left Behind was selling in the millions. The Prayer of Jabez was about to sell in the millions more. Devotionals, testimonies, and inspirational biography moved real volume through a bookstore network that no longer exists in the same form. Family Christian stores. Berean, Limestone, hundreds of independent shops attached to churches. A book like Matt's had a distribution channel purpose-built for it, and Multnomah knew how to work that channel. Tracy Sumner did the structural work. Sumner was a professional writer brought in as co-author, which is standard practice when a first-time author has a compelling life and no idea how to build a chapter. Matt supplied the memories. Sumner supplied the architecture. The result reads cleanly, which most self-written first memoirs do not. The physical object was built to be kept rather than read once and discarded. Hardcover, color pictorial dust jacket, illustrations inside, some black and white, some color, including photographs of Matt at various ages. A book designed for a nightstand or a coffee table, picked up in pieces, lent to a friend at church. Publishers make those choices deliberately. Paperback says disposable. Hardcover with photographs says heirloom. Now the contents. Matt opened with his body because there was no way around it. 15 surgeries before adulthood. Diastrophic dysplasia, a form of dwarfism that affects cartilage and joints and makes the ordinary business of walking a negotiation. Hospital wards, anesthesia, casts, recovery periods that swallowed months. He wrote about the loneliness of hospital culture in the 60s and 70s, when parents were often not permitted to stay overnight, and a child could go days seeing only nurses. The surgeries themselves deserve a moment. 15 is not 15 appointments. Each one meant an admission, an operation, a recovery, a course of physical therapy, and a return to a body that worked differently than it had the week before. Some were on his legs, some were spinal, some corrected problems created by earlier corrections. That is the reality of orthopedic intervention on a growing skeleton with a cartilage disorder. You fix one thing and create the next thing to fix. Add the days up, and Matt spent close to 700 of them in hospital beds before he turned 18. 2 years of childhood, roughly, spent inside. He was not in school with the other kids. He was not on the field. He was learning to occupy his own mind for long stretches with nobody to talk to, which is a skill that either breaks a child or builds something in him that lasts. He wrote about Ron and Peggy Roloff. His father had been a Marine Corps helicopter mechanic from 1957 to 1961 before moving into civilian work. His mother held the household together through years of surgeries and medical bills. Matt gave them credit throughout the book, and readers who only knew Ron and Peggy from occasional appearances on television in later years got a much fuller portrait here. The family carried more than one burden. Ron and Peggy raised children with serious health issues, plural. Matt's brother Sam also has diastrophic dysplasia. Managing that household through the 60s and 70s on a working man's income with the medical system of the period took a kind of grinding endurance that does not photograph well and rarely makes it into a television edit. Matt put it on the page. Then there is Joshua. Matt's brother Joshua was alive when Matt wrote about him. He died in 1999 at 34, the same year the book reached shelves. That timing gives certain passages a weight Matt could not have intended. He was writing about a living brother, and by the time strangers were reading those sentences in bookstores, Joshua was gone. There is no way to read those pages now without the shadow on them. Matt covered his career next. Software sales in the 80s and 90s, working the accounts that a technical salesperson works, sitting across from procurement officers who had never met a 4-foot salesman and did not know where to put their eyes. He wrote about walking into those rooms anyway, about the calculation every little person makes at the door of a meeting. Address the difference or ignore it and let the room adjust. He had opinions about which worked better. That career put him in Silicon Valley during its formative decade. Enterprise computing was being invented and sold at the same time. Nobody buying a system in 1988 knew what they were buying, which meant the sale depended entirely on whether the buyer trusted the person explaining it. Matt made his living being trusted by people who had every cultural reason to underestimate him on sight. He learned to control a room in the first 90 seconds or lose it. Then there is the advocacy, which the book treats as an equal part of his life rather than a hobby. Matt served as national president of Little People of America, the main advocacy organization for people with dwarfism in the United States. That is an elected volunteer post with real responsibilities: conferences, medical resource coordination, media requests, policy positions, and the slow work of connecting isolated families to a community they did not know existed. Parents of a newly diagnosed infant call an organization like LPA in the worst week of their lives. Matt was on the other end of that phone tree. He was doing this while working a demanding sales job, raising 4 children under 10, and writing a book. The image of Matt Roloff that television eventually produced, the restless builder who cannot leave a project alone, was fully formed long before a camera confirmed it. He wrote about Amy. They married in 1987 after meeting through Little People of America. By 1999, they had been married 12 years and had 4 children. The book covers the courtship, the decision to marry, the early years, and the arithmetic of raising a family on 1.5 incomes while Matt traveled for work. The children barely appear, and that is a matter of timing. In July of 1999, Zach and Jeremy were 9, Molly was 6, Jacob was 2. They were small children with no public identity and no reason to have one. Matt wrote about being their father, not about who they were. Anyone picking up the book hoping for early portraits of the LPBW cast will be disappointed, and probably should be. The disclosure that surprises most readers comes from Matt's 20s. He was addicted to cocaine. He wrote it plainly. He had started experimenting with drugs, worked his way up, and ended up somewhere he never expected to be. His words, roughly, he never thought he would be someone who used drugs, thought he could try it and walk away, and was wrong about that. Family helped him get clean. He stayed clean. Think about what that admission cost in 1999. There was no cultural framework yet for celebrity addiction memoirs as a genre. There was no reality television confessional to soften it. He was a Christian author, writing for a Christian publisher and a Christian readership, admitting to hard drug use in a book those readers would hand to their teenagers. He put it in anyway. Whatever else you think about Matt Roloff, that took nerve. The themes running under all of it are perseverance and faith, in that order. Matt's argument, made across the whole book, is that his physical limitations were not the point of his life. They were the terrain his life happened on. He was not asking readers to admire him for being a little person. He was asking them to look at what he had built and consider what they might build. And then there is the line about television. Somewhere in Against Tall Odds, Matt advises readers to stay away from television as much as possible if they want to make anything of their lives. He meant it as a warning about passive consumption. Turn the box off, do something, build something. 7 years later, he signed with TLC. 25 seasons followed, nearly 400 episodes, a Guinness World Record for most episodes of a family-focused reality series, a pumpkin patch that draws tens of thousands of visitors every October, largely because of that television exposure. The Roloff Farms brand, the Instagram following, the property values, the speaking fees, the book sales that came after, nearly all of it traces back to a decision that contradicted the advice in his own book. Matt has never made much of the contradiction, and there is a reasonable defense. Warning readers against sitting on a couch watching television is not the same as refusing to appear on it. One is consumption, the other is work. Still, the sentence sits there in a book with his name on the cover, and it is one of the small pleasures of reading Against Tall Odds now. The speaking circuit deserves its own accounting, because most fans assume it came after the show. It did not. Tyson Foods, Walmart, Indiana University, the South Dakota Governor's Conference. Those are not church basements. Those are corporate and institutional bookings with travel budgets and honorarium lines. And companies do not hire an unknown to address their workforce. What was he selling from those stages? Inclusion, mostly, overcoming odds, sales leadership, which he could speak to with authority because he had closed real deals. Corporate America in the 90s was building diversity programming and needed speakers who could talk about difference without lecturing the room. Matt could do that. He was funny, he was concrete, and he had numbers behind him. A published book makes a speaker bookable at a higher rate. That is simply how the market works. The book validates the speaker, the speaking sells the book, and each one raises the price of the other. Matt was running that loop years before TLC entered the picture. He understood the machinery of building a public platform, and he had built one, on a small scale, entirely on his own. What did the book actually do commercially? Modest numbers. It found its Christian readership and sold reasonably within it. It was not a crossover hit. It got no mainstream review attention and no television promotion because Matt had none to give it. Multnomah put it out, it did its job, and it settled into the long tail where Christian inspirational titles live. Reader reactions that survive online tend to land in the same place. People call it a light, quick read. Several note that Matt circles back to his disability more often than the narrative strictly requires, then immediately forgive him for it, which is probably the correct response. A few flag editing problems that create confusion in places. Almost everyone mentions being caught off guard by the drug chapter, and a striking number of readers come away talking about Ron and Peggy rather than Matt, which says something about how he wrote his parents. Then 2006 arrived, and TLC, and suddenly millions of people wanted to know who this man was. Fans went looking. They found a book from 7 years earlier, written by someone who had no idea any of this was coming. That is what makes it valuable. Every word predates the fame. Nothing in it was written to manage a public image, because there was no public image to manage. Copies still circulate. Used hardcovers run $5 to $15 depending on condition. Signed copies go higher, and Matt has confirmed a few signatures for buyers on Instagram, which tells you he still keeps an eye on the secondary market for his own book. The ISBN is 978-1576-735-831 if you want to search precisely rather than wading through listings. 2 more books followed. Little Family, Big Values in 2007, co-written with Amy, arriving with TLC's audience already in place. Little Lucy, Big Race, a children's book, came later. Both sold on the strength of the show. Neither has the rawness of the first one because neither was written by a man who had no reason to expect anyone would care. Set Matt's book beside Amy's and the contrast sharpens. Amy published A Little Me in 2019, 20 years after Against Tall Odds. She wrote hers alone, without a co-author. She wrote it at 56, after a divorce, with adult children and a public identity already fixed by 13 seasons of television. Her book is a reckoning written by someone who knows exactly who is going to read it. Matt wrote his at 37, with a co-writer, with small kids asleep upstairs, for an audience of strangers who had never heard his name. Both books are honest. Only one was written in the dark. That difference is the whole reason Against Tall Odds still matters. Here's the thing worth sitting with. Matt Roloff was a published author before he was a television personality. Not because publishing made him famous, but because he had something to say and found a house willing to print it. The book came out of conviction, not opportunity. That ordering matters when you are trying to work out who somebody actually is underneath a decade and a half of edited footage. There is also a practical reason to go find a copy. Everything Matt has said publicly since 2006 has been said with an audience in mind, and audiences change what people say. Confessional segments get edited, Instagram captions get workshopped, interviews get steered by whoever is asking. A book written in 1998 for readers who did not know his name has none of that pressure on it. When Matt describes his surgeries or his parents or the year he could not stop using cocaine, he is describing them to nobody in particular. That is as close to an unguarded Matt Roloff as the record contains. It also fills gaps the show never covered. Television needs conflict and resolution inside 42 minutes. It has no room for a chapter on what hospital wards smelled like in 1968, or what it felt like to run a national advocacy organization out of a home office, or how a man in his 20s talks himself into a habit that nearly cost him everything. The book has room for all of it. Read Against Tall Odds, and you meet a 37-year-old man in the middle of his life. 4 young kids, a software career, a volunteer presidency, a speaking circuit, a brother he did not know he was about to lose. He is not defending anything. He is not managing anything. He is just telling you what happened to him and what he made of it. The Matt Roloff who shows up on camera in 2006 is a different man. Older, richer, more guarded, more practiced. 7 years of hindsight and a network contract will do that to anyone. Both versions are real. Only one of them wrote a book before the cameras arrived, and that is the one worth reading. Have you read Against Tall Odds? Did the cocaine disclosure surprise you as much as it surprises most readers? And what do you make of a man who warned his audience away from television and then spent 25 seasons on it?